Hey, what's up, guys?
We're doing well. Thanks for jumping on. So you're the founder of Novig, which is a leading, actually the number one sports prediction market platform in the US, doing $2 billion in annualized volume. And I think you just announced an $18 million Series A from Forerunner, YC, and others. So getting some good traction over the 4 years you've been in market. So I think it's obviously hinted at from your name, Novig, but curious if you can kind of lay out why you think prediction markets are going to revolutionize sports betting.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, for those who don't know, VIG is sort of like the industry term for the spread. Essentially, like it's a measure of how efficient these markets are. And I have actually been a big fan of prediction market for many years. I got into it through platforms like Predict It, where I was betting on politics. I've been trading on various sorts of platforms for years, and just it blew my mind that there are these sort of political prediction market platforms where you can, it sort of became this like oracle of truth, and it was also just wildly entertaining. And I did quite well betting on things like Brexit and the French elections and so on. And it just blew my mind that these markets were so much more efficient than sports markets that had orders of magnitude more volume, and felt like they were still reliant on this super antiquated model of betting against the house, basically this casino model, where the spreads were sometimes over 10% despite having trillions of volume. And as someone who's interested in financial markets, it just blew my mind that that still existed. And prediction markets really solve that, by creating this two-sided marketplace, introducing order book mechanics. And I think the U.S. market in particular is, I think, ripe for disruption, given the just how much more interest there is in trading in general. Whether that's through betting on the presidential election or trading crypto or trading, like Dogecoin or AMC or whatever it is. There's this overlap between sports bettors and retail traders, and I think people are waking up to the fact that the current state of sports betting is broken, it's inefficient, it's not consumer friendly, and prediction markets solve that.
So I saw on your site that 27% of your users are profitable versus just 2% on other sports books. Is that literally just because there's no VIG? Like, is that the impact it can have?
Yeah. I think like people don't realize the like how much of a difference just reducing the edge even marginally. If you think about like flipping a coin, if you reduce the a weighted coin that let's say lose 52% of the time, in the long run 0% of people will be profitable, even if in like a small sample size it seems like you have a realistic chance. And so what we're doing is basically reducing your break even point from 54% or 53%, depending on the markets you're betting into, to basically 50.2%, 50.1%. And as a result, you're over 10 times more likely to be long-term profitable trading into a more efficient market.
So what is the shift in the business model here? Because obviously that VIG is profit for the casinos or the betting platforms. Are you just charging less, or is there a different business model here?
Yeah, I mean, the business model is essentially the difference between a one-sided retail business model where you're betting against the house to one where you're trading into a two-sided marketplace, essentially like any other order book. So it's essentially eliminating the intermediary. Like just to use a very simple example, say you and I want to bet on Real Madrid versus Barcelona or something. We each want to put up $100. Right now, like with the current state of the industry before prediction markets were introduced, we'd both have to bet against the house, against the casino, and they would say you put up $100 to win back $90, and they say the same thing to me. They collect $200 and then they pay out $180 essentially. And what we're doing is basically facilitating peer-to-peer trades the same way any marketplace or any stock exchange or anything would. It's not really crypto enabled. It's just like a standard order book mechanic. We're operating under the sweepstakes framework in the U.S., but actively looking to expand into different regulatory categories and geographically as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I am curious about how you bootstrap liquidity here. So is it, and then maybe where crypto would actually be useful here or not?
Yeah. So like the nice thing about sports is that there really is just a tremendous amount of retail demand. So unlike other prediction market platforms that, that there's like this novel type of contract that it's like very difficult to price, and there's like a tremendous amount of adverse selection. With sports, you have, there's an abundance of people who are willing to quote these markets, so it's actually much easier to overcome the cold start problem. There are ways that we sort of bootstrap that. We have a small internal trading desk to provide liquidity in the early stages of when we post markets or when no one else is quoting. Especially in game, it's a bit more challenging. But you have I think people often think like prediction markets are like there have been betting exchanges for decades in the sports betting space that have been trying to do this. So it's not as though like it's all started in the last 2 or 3 years. There have been a number of attempts that have been successful. The largest is Betfair, and they for a while, I mean, they still are, but they have made a big impact on the European betting market. And so I think like they really pioneered this model that facilitates a sort of financialized version of sports betting. Crypto, I think like there are a lot of great crypto projects in the sports betting space. I'm not like, our team is not the most crypto native. We are exploring ways we can bring our market on chain. One, to sort of offer it globally outside of the US, and two, there's I think a lot of interesting ways that you can really tighten the spread to create these like hyper liquid markets in a way that there's a bit more friction in sort of the web 2.0 sphere.
It's a keyword that's going to get the bots into
hyperliquid mentioned.
No, not ever. Yeah, just like
we're here.
So this is obviously a non-consensus idea when you started it 4 years ago, at least within the context of the US. But obviously, people are waking up to it. So you have traditional sports books stepping into prediction markets, and kind of the generalized prediction market stepping into sports. So I guess on one hand, it's obviously validation for the insight that you've been building on, but also presents some increasingly large challenges. So curious what you think it's going to take to win here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's important to delineate that there are a couple different phenomena at play. One is that the regulatory environment is adapting quite rapidly in the US. And if you look at what companies like Kalshi and Robinhood are doing at the CFTC level, that's, it's easy to attribute that to just like the sort of prediction market model. But in reality, a lot of it is just like a regulatory arbitrage play that they're able to offer this product nationwide, that they don't have to get licensed on a state-by-state level the way that companies like FanDuel and DraftKings have to. They can leverage distribution networks of platforms like Robinhood. And it's not necessarily by virtue of them being a prediction market, so to speak. It's really just them offering a sports betting product. And so I think it's easy to sort of buy into the hype that this is all because of this revolutionary new business model, which I think that's true in part. I am a sort of prediction market evangelist, purist, believer, but I do think a lot of it is sort of the regulatory component as well. So I think like the real vision is to create this sort of like global exchange that is like the infrastructure layer for all liquidity in the sports trading arena. I think that's like, you can certainly make an argument that the way to do that in the most efficient sort of hyperliquid way is doing it on chain in some capacity. But I do think like that also introduces a number of points of friction for the traditional sports fan, which I think is a very different demographic than like your average crypto trader.
Yeah, I'm interested in sort of the go-to-market here, because it looks like you have sort of a just for fun model, and then you have a cash model. You have gone after licensing, it looks like, in various states. I think you're licensed in 35 different states. I'm curious if you could just give us the high-level strategy here about how you're actually growing your user base and maybe how the regulation plays a part of that.
Yeah, so we're operating in a different regulatory category than some of the other players. That we're a free-to-play sweepstakes product. So if you're familiar with platforms like Manifold, we're operating in a similar capacity, where our default product is a free-to-play prediction market with no purchase necessary. So we offer you all the fun of sports trading without any of the monetary
The real
risks.
fun of losing money,
Well,
feeling alive.
Yeah, I think it's fun because like it allows people to interact with sports markets in a different way, where you can not just be a price taker, you can be a price maker. You can like be your own house and offer prices and experiment with market making, which is a new concept for a lot of people. And it's with Novig coins, which have no redemption value, and sometimes people have like some new thesis about trading live sports in some way or whatever, and they can test that on the free to play side. And then we have the sweepstakes product where you can win real cash prizes. You can trade with Novig Cash, which can be redeemed for US dollars, and that's that's allowed us to operate in over 35 states in the US. We are actively tracking what's going on with the CFTC and the lawsuits that Kalshi and Robinhood and others are engaged in, and it's possible that we launch a similar platform to Kalshi and Polymarket in the next year or two. But for now, we're seeing a lot of success with our current platform.
It's interesting because I mean, clearly regulatory changes are having a big impact on the market. I think maybe there's some question about the longevity there, but it seems like you've built your entire business around to fit into a specific regulatory space, and that has changed. So, like, are you late to the shift?
No, I mean, I think we actually initially launched as a regulated sports betting operator. So under the same regulatory category as DraftKings and FanDuel and so on. We were licensed in Colorado before moving to the sweepstakes model. And, I think our team is I think we have, from a technical perspective, the sharpest team in the space. And also, I think have the most domain expertise around sports markets. And I think I've proven our resilience being able to pivot from one regulatory framework to another. I do think there's just a lot of uncertainty with what's going on with, the CFTC space. It's unclear sort of the long-term viability of this space. I think it's possible it goes to the Supreme Court, and it's, unclear like whether sports are going to be allowed long-term. Obviously signs are pointing in that direction, but, I think we're really just focus on building the best product experience, the most efficient markets, the most user-friendly experience, and whatever sort of regulatory framework we have to operate in, I think we'll be able to do that successfully.
Feels like prediction markets might be helpful here in trying to figure out where the regulatory environment is going, because I think it is interesting to think about sports and the incumbents there and the long history of sports betting, and probably needing to look at that regulatory environment even in the wider CFTC sort of shifts that are happening there, and see if there is actually longevity there. So yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, I think like what we really strongly believe is that there is far more demand for sports markets than any other types of prediction markets. Like nerds like me like to bet on politics. Obviously, people are interested in some of the markets that are being posted, but by and large, the average prediction market user is interested in sports. And we think that building a sort of user experience around the sports trading experience will, differentiate us from some of the more agnostic prediction markets. And that there's a lot of nuances that sports are just the actual underlying asset that you're trading when you're trading, like whether some player is going to score a basket. It's very different than whether someone's going to get confirmed by the Senate. And it's important to understand the median sports fan when you're building for that audience. And so I think I do believe in the broader prediction market category, but I also think that you're going to have platforms emerge, whether that's like sort of L2s on top of a Kalshi or Polymarket, or building their own platform where it's like custom built around scientific research, around crypto trading, around sports, around local culture or whatever it is, or the media or music. And I think those platforms are probably capable of building these sort of distinct user experiences for these different use cases, but I think there's going to be a number of other companies popping up that are just hyper-focused on this one sort of area and this one demographic that's interested in this experience.
On that note, I'm interested in what maybe some of the more novel product or betting experiences that you're thinking about from this, since you're building kind of from this prediction market starting point versus traditional sportsbook starting points.
What do you mean by that exactly?
So I think the natural starting point is, okay, you want to, I want to bet on this team. I can have Novig or better, more liquid markets by doing it with a prediction market. But I'm curious, what are like the second, third order kind of product effects of using prediction markets versus, traditional markets?
Yeah, like honestly, the truth is I think the effects are probably overstated. Like if you look at who's innovating on the product side, you have a lot of traditional sports betting platforms. Like from my perspective, like you have companies like Fanatics, FanDuel, DraftKings, I'd say are probably the three most innovative traditional sports betting companies in the US that are innovating on this front. And then you have daily fantasy sports players like Prize Picks and Underdog. Underdog is now trying to get into prediction markets as well. But, these are people who, who just have a deep understanding of their users and are building the types of products that they want, whether it's like more gamified versions of this or more like fantasy aspects or in-game stuff, micro betting, like things that expire super quickly. These are all types of contracts and markets that you don't necessarily need a two-sided market to price. You just need you can have a traditional sports betting platform that's committed to pricing these things, and in some ways you actually can have more. You can have a wider variety of markets actually if you do have a single operator pricing these markets, because they're less concerned about adverse selection. Like traditional sports books can limit and ban people from their platforms that are hyper sophisticated. So they're like, we don't want you on the platform because you're winning a lot of money. And because they can kick these people out, then they can start offering all of these like crazy types of bets, as long as their, counterparties are unsophisticated, entertainment seeking sports fans, they're fine with it. And that allows them to actually offer lots of types of markets that prediction markets might actually struggle to, given the nature of adverse selection.
Yeah, that's interesting. The advantage player. I've yet to be banned for being an advantage player in any of these things yet.
They want to keep you around.
They definitely want to keep me around. Make money on politics, lose it on the Vancouver Canucks. Sounds fun.
Yeah, like there's one example of something is like, I had this idea of like it'd be a really cool product if you could choose any two sports teams and like basically you could have a market on X team doing better than Y team. And so it's like this sort of head-to-head thing. You can even do it with things in the non-sports space, like choose any two, say, venture-backed startups and be like, which of these companies will have more active users by the end of 2026 or whatever it is, and then have a market that's quoted just for like this head-to-head market. But the problem is like those things are, you have these like hyper sophisticated people that will probably beat whoever is quoting these markets. And you'll have these like edge cases and, whatever it is that it's like hard to quote, but that's something that a sports book could do much more easily, because they can limit your bets to, let's say, $50 or like limit the people who are winning the most and introduce more novel types of betting. So I am like super bullish on prediction markets. And I think they're going to create hyper efficient markets for lots of sort of the standard types of betting markets. But there are, I think, actually, challenges that you run into by virtue of having this prediction market model. And you need to, the marketplace has to incentivize makers. And I think that's why you have platforms like Polymarket and Kalshi now paying people to essentially quote markets. Because otherwise, you'd rather be playing offense than playing defense. It's like much easier to be a price taker than to be a price maker.
Yeah, the friction's a benefit to the business model ultimately. And so interesting to see where that competitive advantage sort of shows up. I'm curious, I think, you're playing in a very competitive market, one where there is a ton of money and one where your competitors are generally taking more margin than you are here. So I'm very interested in the go-to-market here. Like, how have you grown to be the number one sports prediction market specifically? What are the tactics that are working to get you out in front?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, so yeah, number one is just having a great user experience. Like if you download our app, I think our general product philosophy is build the most efficient performance prediction market under the hood, but from a user experience perspective, from a UI UX perspective, to make it as familiar, accessible, sleek, sexy to the casual sports fan. So not just appealing to these like price sensitive, sharp traders, but also to the everyday sports fan. And so I think our our app looks and feels just way easier to use than a lot of other similar platforms in the industry. We also offer, I think, more market and feature parity to existing platforms. Like we have the most robust parlay and same game parlay trading experience. And I think that's something that the everyday sports fan loves, that it's much harder for prediction markets to pull off successfully. And yeah, we have a great like referral promo. I think that's been a big driver of our growth. You refer a friend, you each get 50 Novig cash. But a lot of it's been through just like word of mouth. I think we have the highest retention of any product in this space. And I think that's because we built just a great product that people love to use and tell their friends about, and hasn't required us spending, insane amounts of money on billboards in Times Square and stuff like that. So
free money, give me free money, baby. The best incentive out here, right?
Totally.
Nice.
Awesome.
Well, Jacob, thanks for coming through, man. Excited to kind of keep watching your progression. It was cool to see your step into crypto last week. Hope it continues trending in that direction. We need more great founders building this space. So
we have an exciting project next year. Will, I think, take it a step further. So
love to hear. We'll have you back on to talk about it.
Definitely. Well, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Jacob.
Of course. Peace.
All right, cheers.